what we saw is infrastructure was really tightly bundled with a narrow use case. We realized with Turnkey, we needed to go a layer below that. We needed to build something that had very flexible API-based primitives that were super scalable and could evolve with the world of crypto. If I have all of my money managed by an AI agent, that's pretty scary. They could go off, they could hallucinate about something and send it all to North Korea, and that would not be great for me. And so one of the things that we've invested in really heavily at Turnkey is our policy engine, which allows you to limit the permission of a specific API key and how that can access a wallet. I think crypto native funds can lean hard into hype cycles, whereas less crypto native funds can really be thinking about the core business underneath these and thinking about how this grows longer term. In terms of where they plug in as well, crypto native funds have been super helpful on our go-to-market and getting us in touch with these early stage crypto companies as they're getting off the ground. Whereas non-crypto native funds are helping us think bigger and think, hey, who are the traditional folks who are starting to get into crypto that we should be talking to, that we should be pushing on?
Hello, Bryce. Welcome to the New Money podcast. Back in the original studio, we've got the Lydian Lion, the oldest coin in the world. And we've got Bryce Ferguson with us today, founder and CEO at Turnkey, who's helping us understand how the future of money actually looks like. Turnkey, I think, in the industry needs no further introduction, backed by Sequoia, Lightspeed, Galaxy, among others, and most recently raised a $30 million Series B from Bain Capital Ventures. And we're going to talk about a bunch of interesting things, including Crypto Week, the history of wallet infra, the fundraise you guys just did, and a bunch of exciting future topics around agentic payments, stablecoins, and whatever's on the horizon. Bryce, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat.
Amazing. So we chatted to your co-founder, Jack, CDO at Turnkey, in preparation for this conversation. He told us an anecdote how you actually went to an arts high school and then pivoted to Georgia Tech to pursue engineering. Bryce, in your opinion, building product, is it more art or science?
Oh, it's a very good question. I definitely think it is more art than science. And it's been interesting for me being at different companies over time. For certain companies, I think execution is everything and you're just chasing after kind of a known product. But especially in crypto, it's completely art. There's so much open space and trying to figure out exactly what needs to be built to kind of move the industry forward. And so, yeah, I look back fondly on those years in arts high school for sure.
What would you say is the most artistic thing you guys built at Turnkey so far?
I think our infrastructure foundation is just really, really novel, and artistic maybe is not the right word, but very innovative at the very least. So we've built a way to deploy verifiable applications into trusted execution environments. And a lot of this was just inspired by the fact that in many ways, Turnkey is creating the biggest honeypot in the world where security is everything. And so we really had to innovate on security in order to build something that was as secure, scalable, flexible as we needed it to be.
And we're going to jump into kind of the ins and outs of that in a second. In terms of aesthetically pleasing products, and I guess as an art aficionado, I think building infrastructure potentially can be sometimes a bit frustrating, but do you have a favorite product from an aesthetics point of view? Any company you want to give a shout out to?
Frankly, I look back fondly on Trade Republic from an aesthetics point of view. I think they have boiled their product down to just really core UI flows and core interfaces. So that's a big one for me. I really like Rainbow Wallet as well in the crypto space. I think that they have been doing cool things on the wallet side for a very long time and have transformed what it means to have a wallet and interact with crypto on chain.
Oh, I appreciate that. You mentioned Trade Republic, which is, I think, another little link we have. You've been in Berlin, you've lived in Berlin for, I think, a year and a half or something like that. And now you're back in New York City. Maybe briefly walk us through the Bryce Ferguson story. Where do you come from? How did you end up at Turnkey? And walk us through the journey a bit.
Yeah, so you got the first two steps. I went to an arts high school and then studied engineering at Georgia Tech. And I think while I was studying, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so did what many people in that position do and joined management consulting. So was at Bain for 3 years and was working on a lot of consumer companies, everything from Red Lobster to Coca-Cola to things like that. With that, I got pretty broad exposure, but it was just so slow. It was a lot of these companies that weren't innovating at all. It was tens of thousands of people that were just keeping the core product alive. And with my engineering background, I definitely wanted to move towards something a little bit more tech forward. And so I jumped over to San Francisco and joined Coinbase. I had a bunch of friends from my consulting days at Coinbase. And it really was that innovative spirit that I was looking for. It was super bleeding edge. Coinbase at the time was 180 people, and it was kind of the center of gravity for crypto in a lot of ways. It was all of these people that were there because they wanted to push the market forward because they really believed in crypto. And I think that with that, crypto was kind of an opaque industry at the time as well. So there wasn't a lot of information out there. There weren't as many crypto influencers online talking about all the trends in crypto. And so I really got to learn a ton about how crypto was evolving, all the foundational infrastructure that was being put in place. And I worked with my co-founder, Jack, on building Coinbase Custody. So he was the first engineer. I was the first product manager on Coinbase Custody, and really got to put that first institutional custodian in place, growing that from 0 to $100 billion of assets. Got to a point about 3 years in where Coinbase Custody was the dominant player. Rather than going 0 to 1, it was going like 10 to 100 or 10 to 1,000. And that scaling point was going to be a little bit more predictable for me. And so I got really hungry for another 0 to 1 experience and got introduced to the founders of Trade Republic out in Berlin. It was the middle of COVID. And when I started talking to them, I was like, I haven't heard of Trade Republic. I don't know what this is. I'm not going to move to Berlin from San Francisco. I'm not German. I don't speak German. I don't know anyone over there. But the more that I talked to them, the more I realized that there was something really special about the company, and they were taking crypto pretty seriously and wanted to lean in hard there. I moved to Berlin. It was still full lockdown. Had to quarantine in my really tiny German apartment for like 2 or 3 weeks, and got to build out the team, got to build out the crypto product, launch that all across Europe, and see a different angle. So at Coinbase, I was building infrastructure, and then at Trade Republic, I was using a lot of these infrastructure providers and getting to see what the rough edges were, what was working and what wasn't working. During that time, my co-founder, Jack, he was the CTO of Polychain, which is a $10 billion crypto hedge fund. And so he had a similar experience where he was using all of these different crypto custody providers and frankly, just banging his head against the wall for a lot of it. So we got together in 2022 with this vision of we should actually pull infrastructure out of custody and go as low level as possible with really flexible tools around how you can create and manage wallets as part of whatever application you're building. You hear that now and it's kind of like, oh, well, of course, like API powered wallets, that seems so obvious. But in 2022, that just didn't exist. You couldn't do that. It was all of these really clunky point and click web interfaces that people were dealing with and kind of trying to layer on products on top of that. So yeah, that was 3 years ago now. Obviously has been a pretty crazy journey since, but that's the story of how I got to start.
I appreciate that. How did you like Berlin?
It was amazing. I think Berlin during lockdown, not so great because it is not the most beautiful city, but very vibrant in terms of restaurants and culture and places to go out. And I was really pleasantly surprised by how bustling the tech scene was there. It felt like people were moving to Berlin from all across Europe just to get involved in the Berlin tech scene.
How did that feel, kind of moving from the ultimate crypto company, Coinbase, to moving a non-crypto company, or kind of a traditional fintech, Trade Republic, dabbling in crypto? How intense was the culture shock?
It was a big change, honestly. I think at Coinbase, there were a lot of foundational truths that people believed, and I got to Trade Republic, and a lot of my job was just getting people caught up on how crypto works and why it's important. So things that I took for granted, I needed to make sure that other people understood. And so at times, you have to push the rock uphill there, but I think overall Trade Republic was really trying to adopt more Silicon Valley style company building, and with that really wanted to innovate, wanted to push the envelope a little bit.
Did they launch the crypto product in the end?
Yeah. Yeah, so they still have crypto trading across, I think, 50 plus assets now.
Did it deliver on the expectations? I don't know, actually. Like, I always had the feeling that growing up in Berlin, Trade Republic was always like this amazing and big and role model type company for many of the fintechs here. But I always had the feeling crypto didn't catch on as aggressively as it did with Revolut, for example, and other kind of like traditional fintech applications.
No, it ended up being a really strong product for them. And I think the big differentiator here is a lot of Germans wanted to, and frankly, folks across Europe wanted to own crypto with a regulated bank. They still viewed crypto through something like Coinbase as a little bit risky. Coinbase feels so solid, but then you have, FTX, which felt so solid, crumbling. And so I think that German regulation that is known for being best of the best in banking regulation gave people a lot of comfort as they were buying crypto through Trade Republic.
Did you actually interface with the German regulator, or was there a different team kind of handling that?
My German is not good enough to interface with the German regulators yet. So it was mostly other teams that were managing the regulators.
Because the German regulator has this thing that they really need you to speak German, right?
Yeah.
They push back on that pretty heavily. No, appreciate it. And you've teased on it a bit, right? But in terms of the market you guys are operating in terms of how wallet and infrastructure and custody has evolved over time, how would you kind of like sketch out the mini timeline here up until today, and then maybe tell us a bit about the position that Turnkey has in the market today and where you see that going?
Yeah. I mean, even going back to prior to Coinbase Custody, I think it's interesting to see how some of these things evolved. All of the early exchanges, they didn't have an option. They had to build key management and wallet management infrastructure in-house because they realized, we're holding millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of crypto. And if we don't take this seriously, it's a company-ending problem for us. So folks really were bundling key management with this trading option. And as time went on and a lot of institutions got interested in investing in the space because they saw an opportunity to grow here, they came to Coinbase, they came to other folks and they said, hey, you guys are best of the best in holding all this crypto. How can you do this for us? How can we, with our $100 million of Bitcoin as a VC or a hedge fund, hold this on your infrastructure? And that was really what pushed Coinbase to start Coinbase Custody and for a lot of these other custodians to get started. But I think throughout time, and I'll talk about a couple more iterations of this, what we saw is infrastructure was really tightly bundled with a narrow use case. So the first version was wallet infrastructure with trading. The second version was wallet infrastructure with custody and just kind of long-term storage of assets. And Coinbase Custody was really great if you were holding $100 million of crypto over a year and you're not really touching it, but not great if you were trying to move assets on a daily basis or more frequently. And so we had a lot of short-term custody options come to market. So Fireblocks, Copper, a couple other folks who had played in that area of like, hey, I'm a market maker and I want to move assets across centralized exchanges. After that, those folks, they weren't able to serve this wallet as a service use case, the consumer wallet as a service use case. And so we had a lot of folks, again, build these high level abstractions for wallet as a service. And now what we're seeing is a lot of folks are doing really high throughput machine-based transactions. They might be doing payments or AI transactions, which are always going to be much more instantaneous and much more high throughput. And so as we saw this market evolve, as we saw every single time people were too brittle with how they approached infrastructure because they were overfitting on a specific use case, we realized with Turnkey, we needed to go a layer below that. We needed to build something that had very flexible API-based primitives that were super scalable and could evolve with the world of crypto. And I think that's been super powerful because we aren't painted into a corner with a specific use case. We're able to serve everything from payments to AI agents to trading bots to NFT platforms. Anything that you can really imagine can be built on top of Turnkey.
Walk us maybe through a couple of these real-life customer stories, maybe one or two of your favorites that are live today.
So there are two big buckets of use cases for Turnkey, and I'll talk about a few examples on either side. On one hand, we have people use us for embedded wallets. On the embedded wallet side, this is basically allowing users to use things like email, OAuth, or SMS to sign into a non-custodial wallet that only that user controls. On that side, a couple of things that I think are really awesome. Moonshot is one of the biggest crypto trading apps in the world. It was the number one finance app for a little bit. Has driven a lot of the meme coin craziness over the last year. And they're completely built on Turnkey. They use us for all the wallets underneath the hood. And, users can sign in with email and then buy a meme coin with Apple Pay. We also have Axiom, which is another interesting one. It's more of a pro trading experience, and they have been growing like absolute wildfire. And they actually are able to offer more advanced order types using our policy engine. So they're able to set up things like TWAPs or limit orders or so forth, which are usually quite challenging to do with non-custodial wallets. The other side of the house, we have a lot of folks use us for transaction automation. So this is basically a business that is doing stuff with crypto on their own. So that they are using Turnkey as basically API-powered private keys that they can sign transactions with. A couple examples here. Bridge uses us for their backend payments flows, and they're able to automate a lot of wallet generation for unique addresses and transactions between those wallets or between their different partners. And then on a more crypto native side, Polymarket uses us for smart contract deployment and management. So every time they're launching a new market, they're using Turnkey under the hood to manage that smart contract. So when they had the new market for who's the next Pope going to be, that was actually Turnkey under the hood helping to power that.
Doing God's work.
Yes, exactly.
If you think about these customers and if you reflect on their purchasing decisions, and I think we have Henry from Privy actually on the show later this week. What other companies are they talking to? How do you perceive the kind of like the status quo landscape, and why are these people choosing Turnkey for these specific use cases?
Yeah, there are definitely a couple other wallet providers in the market. I think, again, we view Turnkey as quite different from everyone else on the market. Other folks are building these higher level, more packaged, closed source experiences, and Turnkey is a true infrastructure provider that offers a lot more flexibility. Typically, folks choose us for a combination of things, so security, flexibility, and performance. On the security side, we come from a background of crypto key management, have built infrastructure that Jack actually built the cold storage system at Coinbase. It stores over 10% of all crypto in existence. And so we just operated at scales that nobody else in the market has. And I talked a little bit about that verifiable compute infrastructure using trusted execution environments. There's a very deep technical rabbit hole that we can save for another day. But we have hit this threshold of security that I think, again, nobody else in the market really has. And it has built a lot of trust as we've talked to different enterprises about how they can integrate Turnkey into their stack. The flexibility piece is again, part and parcel with this infrastructure approach. So one thing we just really consistently hear from people is, I wouldn't be able to build what I wanted to build on any product other than Turnkey. So taking that low level approach, taking a lot of flexibility has been very powerful for folks. And then the last piece is performance. We are now in a world where blockchains are really fast, they're really cheap. People need to do thousands and thousands of transactions at very consumer level speeds. And so our signing latency is 50 to 100 milliseconds. A lot of the MPC or old style players are signing at like 5 to 10 seconds, so 100 times slower. And then our throughput is 2,000 transactions per second, where a lot of other providers will fall over at like 20 transactions per second. So again, you're just able to operate at a scale on Turnkey that you can't with other solutions.
Thanks for kind of giving us the overview on the status quo and the today. Let's maybe briefly talk about the future. So you guys just raised a round, or at least just announced the Series B with BCV. What was the thing that you kind of felt you've proven out, where you felt compelled to kind of take it to the next level and raise it?
Yeah, it was actually not our expectation that we were going to raise so early in the year. Part of it was just we were growing so quickly and had so many of kind of the marquee clients and the biggest applications in crypto coming onto Turnkey. Earlier this year, we really got pulled into a fundraise and decided if now is the time where folks are really excited about Turnkey and we're feeling good about our growth, let's supercharge this and bring some more cash on so we can lean into the market. I think now we're at a point where we have so much opportunity across both of those core use cases, embedded wallets and transaction automation. And we're really leaning in to build out those product areas more and more. And so I mentioned that we're this low level infrastructure solution. Part of what we're doing now is building further up the stack. So we have easier and easier abstractions for the most common use cases in crypto as people want to get started quickly.
I was thinking about resource allocation, how you guys are trying to capture the opportunity space now. Like we talked briefly before the episode, right? You're heads down hiring 20, 25 folks. What teams, what functions, how do you allocate the money?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably unsurprising. It's going to be mostly engineering and then go to market. So we're hiring different leaders across the organization, and making sure that we have a lot of technical folks that can help push that product forward. In general, the biggest headcount areas, though, are going to be engineering and just sales.
No, I appreciate that. And if you think about the raise, and I think you've got this wild mix of investors on the cap table, right? From the Sequoias of the world to kind of like the very crypto native firms like Galaxy. Is there a difference between these quote unquote traditional VCs and crypto native funds?
I think there really is, both in how they're able to help a crypto company and in kind of their views on the market. I think at time, crypto native funds, and not even necessarily talking about our investors in particular, but talking more generally, I think crypto native funds can lean hard into hype cycles, whereas less crypto native funds can really be thinking about the core business underneath these and thinking about how this grows longer term. In terms of where they plug in as well, crypto native funds have been super helpful on our go-to-market and getting us in touch with these early stage crypto companies as they're getting off the ground. Whereas non-crypto native funds are helping us think bigger and think, hey, who are the traditional folks who are starting to get into crypto that we should be talking to, that we should be pushing on? So yeah, it has been good to have a combination of those flavors. I think it's nice to have people that understand very deeply the nuances of the crypto industry, but also some that they come with a little bit of skepticism and they're like, hey, the thing that you're saying is kind of dumb and you should think about how to make this a bigger business outside of just crypto.
Do you have an example of this where actually an investor kind of pushed back in a meaningful way and changed the direction a bit?
It's funny because we really haven't changed our direction since we came up with Turnkey. I was actually looking back at our seed deck the other day and I feel like some of the slides in there we could have put in our Series B deck and just walked away and been like, this is the same. In terms of, I think that there have been times where non-crypto investors have cut through the noise a little bit, where we have gotten caught up in trying to predict, okay, how's the market going to evolve and who are the important players and what are the important use cases and so on and so forth. And I remember during one of our board meetings, Alfred, who is our partner from Sequoia, he just looked at us as we were getting down this deep rabbit hole. And he was like, have you talked to your customers? What do they want? And it was really as simple as that of like, who is going to pay us money and who is going to actually lean in hard near term in order to actually make good use of Turnkey's platform versus trying to get over our skis in terms of trying to predict every single evolution of the market.
Talk to us a bit about the lay of the land in DC and give us the American perspective on regulation right now. Crypto Week just wrapped up. Was there anything that surprised you last week?
Not necessarily surprised, but I think it is such a huge shift from a year or two ago where none of this felt like it was near term at all. And now all of the biggest politicians are really leaning in hard to regulatory clarity and finding ways for crypto to be very driven by American innovation. I think overall, it feels like this is going to be another way for the US to kind of dominate the regulatory landscape because it is such a huge player, both in terms of how crypto companies are being built out of the US, how financial institutions, and New York City is such a finance powerhouse. And it's just exciting to see these clear pathways for crypto to be more integrated into the broader financial system.
Any piece of regulation that you're kind of still looking forward to? Anything that's still on the horizon for you that you're really excited about?
Not particularly right now. I think these are the right starting point. And part of this as well is even Genius and Clarity, these still need to be put into actual detailed tactical kind of process. And so seeing how the market absorbs this regulation and how folks react to it, and then also seeing as it goes into place, what are the rough edges and where are the places that people still need more regulatory clarity, I think is going to be important. Ultimately, Turnkey is a non-custodial infrastructure provider, so we don't fall into this regulation.
Let's talk about the even far future. And thanks for giving us kind of like the update on the next year or so with the B raise. But let's look into the next decade and talk about agentic payments briefly. I think let's take it as a given, the assumption that we're going to have agentic commerce and there are going to be billions of agents that are paying each other a trillion times a second all over the world 24/7, and there will be kind of these new identity fraud risk paradigms. If you think about that future, and let's take it as a given, what are different scenarios, how they transact? What are the things that are kind of starting to be really clear for you in terms of a thesis, and where do you still see some gray space to be divided out?
I think it's so early. I think it's so early. And we've seen a lot of folks in the crypto AI space build on top of Turnkey. Wayfinder and Spectral are examples here where they're building AI-powered consumer experiences. I think a lot of these products, they still feel very exploratory, and they are kind of like cool toys for folks to play with that are touching on something really interesting, but people really love to play with them. In terms of how this gets connected, I feel like a lot of these traditional companies getting into crypto is going to be helpful here, where AI agents using crypto wallets will be able to interact with traditional merchants or buy traditional SaaS products and services using crypto. And I think that will be a really powerful paradigm shift where they're not just interacting with different crypto protocols, they're interacting with the entire world of the internet and being able to transact with that world. And so there's going to need to be a lot of experimentation. I think one of the things that we're excited with Turnkey as well is, like you said, you need to have guardrails in place where if I have all of my money managed by an AI agent, that's pretty scary at this point. They could go off, they could hallucinate about something and send it all to North Korea. And that would not be great for me. And so one of the things that we've invested in really heavily at Turnkey is our policy engine, which allows you to limit the permissions of a specific API key and how that can access a wallet. And so you can set limits on transaction details or the specific smart contracts that you can interact with, so on and so forth. And we're seeing a lot of the AI companies use these policies pretty heavily. So they want to make sure that they can give scoped permissions to these AI agents, but not let them run wild and take whatever action that they'd like.
Are there initial, kind of to your point of this being really early, like are there initial use cases that you're actually seeing out in the wild driving real commerce situations? Or
I think in general, it's easier ways to interact with DeFi that feel more real. But in terms of interacting with more traditional commerce and merchants, have not seen a ton in that space yet. Much more exploratory.
Thank you so much for kind of walking us through the history of the market, the status quo, the future, the far future. Let's wrap it up with a round of quickfire questions. I'll just shoot you 2 or 3 questions, and the challenge is to answer them in a sentence or something like that. Okay. Does that make sense for you?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Amazing. If you could be the CEO, Bryce, of another fintech or crypto company, which one would you pick?
I feel like it's so easy to say Coinbase. Coinbase is absolutely crushing it, and I think has such broad exposure across all of the important areas of crypto. Really admire Brian Armstrong for my time there, and I just think it would be fun. You get to touch so many different things at the same time. It's a really broad mandate that they have.
How big was Coinbase actually when you worked there?
So it was about 180 when I joined, and I left, I think, around 2,000 or 2,500. Over 10x while I was there.
Did you work with Brian kind of quite closely, or was that already a bit detached?
Definitely quite closely. We usually we called them Brian Review, where he would review different kind of new product features and would have that on like a bi-weekly basis with Coinbase Custody.
And what do you think made him an effective leader? What are you kind of maybe even taking with you to building Turnkey?
I think that there was really a focus on operational excellence and how do you run a large organization where you give a lot of independence to folks, and how do you do that effectively? I think the other piece was knowing when to get your hands dirty and when to dive in deep. And so a lot of CEOs, they would see Brian doing Brian reviews where he was literally looking at Figmas with the team and going screen by screen as a waste of time. But I think for him to be that plugged into the product was super, super important at the time, as the products across the board, across Coinbase, were evolving really rapidly.
Makes sense. So we detoured directly. Second one, what's one thing traditional finance does way better than crypto?
I mean, I think payments right now, unfortunately, it's like it can, especially in the Western world, you can take your credit card pretty much anywhere and tap it and be good to go. Still, there are a lot of times where I'm at a crypto conference and there is a crypto payments experience and it's clunky and the transaction doesn't broadcast correctly and things are challenging with how that works. But it's gotten so much better. So it's one of those things that is exponentially improving. So much infrastructure and kind of connective tissue is being built out. And I think over the next year or two, we're going to see really amazing consumer scale use cases.
Bryce, thank you so much for coming on the show. To everyone who listened, I hope you had a good time. Appreciate it. And see you all soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much.